Guys, welcome back. This is a good one.
What's up, saucers? We are here.
What's up, you sexy saucers?
Yeah.
Hint, hint.
Yeah, if you want to put on some candles and some Sade.
And some lingerie.
Put on some lingerie. If you have a partners, get them all together, sit them down because class is in session.
Yes.
Insert a whip.
Yeah, exactly. Damn it. This is a theme I would dress up for.
Oh my. Next time, because we want to have her back. And who we're talking about specifically is our wonderful, beautiful, intelligent guest today. I mean, all of our guests are intelligent, but she's a badass and amazing in her own right. Shelby Terrell. She is a grad student on her way to becoming a sex and relationship therapist.
Yes.
And her story is so amazing, how she became to get into this as a career. And we'll get into that in this podcast. But you have to hear everything she says. We talk all about shame in our society when it comes to sex, what we learn in general.
Yeah, what we learn directly and indirectly, but different backgrounds that can cause us to think these ways, what is and isn't covered in sex education, how it literally, we've been wanting to have this conversation for a long time and we hadn't found a professional to speak to about it because we wanted it to be a guest episode. Yeah. And she's here and I hope she comes back because I would love to have her as our resident sex therapist. Yeah, because on the pod.
This conversation could have lasted, we say that all the time, but this conversation literally could have lasted the entirety of the day because we couldn't stop having questions for her.
Did last a long time, as you can see on the timestamp.
Yeah. So, without further ado, Shelby Terrell. Thank you so much for coming on our pod, Shelby.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
Yes, welcome. God. I'm really excited for this conversation because I think that this is, obviously it's not talked about enough in the cultural lexicon, but definitely not education system. Sex education and just having a healthy sexual outlook about yourself, about society, obviously women in general. But I feel like there's so many things that I want to get into with you. And as you're in your program right now in grad school, and I think that it's like the perfect place to kind of pick your brain and figure out where you want to go with this in your career.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to start off podcast as SOS. So our SOS moment is pretty, is interesting because I don't know if anybody knew this, but according to the Sexual Information Council of the United States, only 38% of high schools and 14% of middle schools across the country teach all 19 topics identified as critical for sex education. And it's I know Molly was saying who are those 38? Because even I figure 19 topics is a lot.
And I'm like, what? I mean, I know you don't probably know the answer to this, but what 38% of schools are covering all that? Because I can't imagine in a public or any kind of official school system where they would go over that. I mean, that barely covered 2 for me.
Yeah, I know. Well, they're here's the egg and here's the...
Don't get pregnant.
Yeah, don't get pregnant.
Yeah.
Don't get an STD.
I will blow your mind a little further with that. My question is, what are those 19 required curricula? Who decided them? Because I can almost guarantee that it was a cis white hetero dude. And to just add some more stats on that for you, so there's a really great resource called Everyone Deserves Sex Ed, and they state that as of March 2020, only 39 states and the District of Columbia mandate sex education. So sex education is really only controlled. And additionally, sex education is only controlled by the state and local government. And so it's not mandated across the United States. It's on a state by state basis. And then within that, parents can sign their kids out of sex ed class at any time because you need a permission slip.
And the sex ed that is considered, this is our sex ed class, is pitiful. Basically.
Yeah. And then Planned Parenthood states that only 19 states require medically accurate sex education, which is when I found that out, I had to sit there and be no wonder no one knows where the fucking clit is. Oh, can I swear on this?
Yes, absolutely.
People are they don't know anything about their own bodies because the majority of the country is learning like, you know, what body parts are you learning? None. That of a fucking animal, like.
Yeah, what considers medically inaccurate? Like, how can you get it wrong?
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, we're going to go into that a little bit later, the details. That is mind blowing. But we want to learn more about you, Shelby, and your journey into this. So, like, what was your formal and maybe informal education like when it came to sex in school and home, whatever?
Yeah. Little to none. I grew up in Utah. I grew up Mormon for the majority of my life. Wow. Yeah. And so already it's a pretty oppressive religion, not only to women, but their outlook on sex is very oppressive, and it's for procreation only, nothing about pleasure. You get married very young, you have kids, and anything outside of that is really a sin. Premarital sex, masturbation. I didn't masturbate until I was 23, and I had already been having sex for like 6 years.
Wow.
But the way that it had translated in my mind was totally wild. And so a lot of my sex ed was through I'm a 90s baby, and so at like the brink of the internet, a lot of curiosity, a lot of digging around, a lot of porn, a lot of talking to my friends, and then really just experiencing it on my own. And there was a lot of things that happened that I really wish didn't, because the trial and error, I just didn't know. And I don't think until my like mid-20s did I really get a full grasp of it. And even still today, like there are things that I'm learning that I'm like, oh fuck, if I'd only known.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like fuels a lot of my drive and desire.
And it just really, I think, stems from like the puritanical basis of like colonialization in this country, colonization in this country, because it's like it's that. And it does stem from, and it's obviously in a lot of religions, but it's like we need to scare, in particular, women about like, you know, women are supposed to be ashamed of their sexuality, supposed to hide it, supposed to don't provoke the men, don't turn the men on, because it's not their fault if they are turned on by you. It's your fault because of what you're wearing or what you said or how you moved. And then it just becomes this thing of like, hide it. And if we don't, basically what I'm trying to say is like, instead of the opposite happens and you don't actually empower women. The more they're afraid that the more women learn about their body, the more maybe sexually devious we would all be, when in reality, we would be that much more empowered and in control, and less, you know, less abuse would happen, less like negative sexual experiences for men and women would happen if women, and I keep saying women, but this is for men too, but I just think about like how uneducated we are about even our own cycle and our own periods and like all of those things, but reproductive health especially. Like if women knew these things about their bodies, it's not like it would make young girls more likely to run around and have sex, which everyone seems to be afraid that they would do. It's more like actually we would have more honor our bodies more, maybe respect what they do more. Like it's really twisted.
Part of my the reason that I embarked on this project was because I'm in grad school to be a sex and relationship therapist, primarily working with the LGBTQIA plus community, and we've been looking at how to liberate oppressed minority groups in this country and how to decolonize certain aspects of social work. My technical degree is I'll be a master of social work and then like a clinical licensed social worker as part of my official degree. But so my project was to decolonize sex education in America. So part of that was looking at sex education in America, but also how the rest of the world kind of treats sex education. And the statistics are really fascinating as far as comparing like teen pregnancies in Europe and Scandinavian countries where their sex education is really age appropriate. It's got a really positive outlook and really positive approach. Per 1,000 teenagers, there was 4 pregnancies. And in America, where it is a shame and fear-based and abstinence-based approach, there was 30 pregnancies per 1,000 teenagers. So like, that's just a very standard statistic, but it's wild.
It's wild because it's literal proof in the numbers, and yet we won't change our systems here.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you might have already sort of kind of alluded to why, but what was the catalyst to make you want to actually go into sexual education?
Yeah.
And learn it?
So I mentioned I grew up Utah, Mormon, but I was always a dancer. I actually did my undergrad in modern dance, and then I was hired by a company in New York City, which brought me from Utah to New York, where I've been for almost 10 years now. And when I moved to New York, I really had this reckoning and awakening with my body. I finally was able to detach enough to find ownership in connect to my sensuality as a woman, and identify to my queerness. I identify as queer. I was also dating someone that I ended up marrying. We're not together anymore, but our relationship was a real point of exploration because I was able to explore. He identifies as queer as well, and we had an open relationship for some time. And so I was immersed in books and podcasts and finding sex, kinky, poly, positive communities. And it exposed a lot of the sexual trauma that I had experienced growing up Mormon in Utah. And so we did couples therapy, and then I had my own sex trauma therapy, basically, where I had, at this point in my professional career, I had stepped away from performing full time. I was doing marketing. And I wasn't happy. I was spending so much time thinking and reading and talking about sex and relationships, and becoming really fascinated and passionate about how sexuality, gender, and relationships all exist on a spectrum. Like, America is, again, I'm using this word again, colonialized in a way where everything exists on a binary. It's rich, poor, black, white, yes, no, high, low, like everything, man, woman, straight, gay, monogamous, non-monogamous, good, bad, like everything exists that way. And so what I started to realize was that my sexuality is very fluid, like all over the place. Relationships are very fluid. I was with one person for 7 years, and we were under this non-monogamous umbrella of monogamous, non-monogamous, poly, swinging, like, and relationships should be, I believe now that I have done the research and I've worked with people now, you have two unique people coming together, and you're trying to fit them into this box of one thing that is supposed to work for everyone, and that's not realistic. Your relationship should be as unique as the two people who come together and create it. There's a really wonderful book called Designer Relationships, which speaks really eloquently to it. But so like within my relationship and that exploration and that work I was doing for myself and my relationship, I realized that I really needed someone that I was becoming when I was going through the struggles that I was having. And then it was COVID and a lot of like teletherapy. And one of my younger sisters came out to me as bisexual, and I was like, fuck, this is my time. And so I quit my marketing job at the advertising agency.
Wow, that gave me chills.
I started graduate school, and I have not been happier. I feel so like, and that's the thing is, like, we are humans. We are sensual and sexual beings. We yearn for connection. That is our whole point of being, I think. And how to do it in a really healthy way when we are literally born and bred into a society where it is socially constructed to make us feel like we need to fit into something that's not authentic to us. And so my whole like desire is to give people a place and a voice and a space to create the best, like to create a safe space for them to figure that out about themselves so that they can have that fulfilling life.
That's like, I think that's so powerful, and kudos to you for making that decision and actually following through with it, because that's scary when you have stability in a job, or even if you don't like the job, but it's like, you know, at least I have a job and I know where my money's coming from, or whatever it may be. But I do kind of want to ask you, having grown up Mormon in Utah and having siblings, apparently a sister or a couple sisters, but I am just like, how did your family, like your parents react? I mean, you went from that type of restrictive oppressive religion, and I don't know anything about your family.
Yeah.
So like going from that in Utah straight to like New York City and and being in an open relationship and being a dancer and finding your sexuality, like how did that mesh with your family at the time?
Yeah. I think I always knew I was pretty different. I'm the oldest of 6. So
Wow.
I have 4 sisters and 1 brother. My brother is right smack dab in the middle. I love all of them so much. My youngest sister just turned 16 yesterday.
Oh.
Yeah, and I'm 31, so we have like a nice span of lifetime between us. But we are growing up. My mom's been married. She's on her 3rd marriage right now. Like it wasn't always a stable household, and as soon as I could, I got out of there pretty quickly. Like between the household situation and then the religion and the like, it just wasn't for me. I was so outside of myself. And so I think the physical distance really helped me be able to come into my own in a really positive way. And coming to New York and having, I have truly the most incredible support system here. I'm a firm believer in chosen family. Like, even though I love my family, I adore them. I just, there's space, love is not finite. And so I have just so many wonderful people in my life that support me in all these different ways. And so I was old enough and secure enough and stable enough in myself and my life that when I did come out to my family, they did not have any, they couldn't respond with anything but like acceptance. I think it was just like, I was like, this is who I am. This is how I'm living my life. If you want to be part of it, great. I love you. I'd love you to be part of it as well. But it was more so for me realizing that as soon as my sister started to mention these things, I was like, I have to be unabashed. I think I'm looking for a word. Fearlessly myself to show them that they can be themselves in Utah still, because for me, I did not have an older sister, or I think that my sisters are still struggling a little bit with my mom and my grandparents. Yeah. But when they told me that they were gay, it wasn't like a coming out. And honestly, I have an issue with the coming out, because it means that you're having to announce that you're something other than normal. But what is normal? Right. Again, it's a social construct. And so the fact that they were like, I have a girlfriend, it wasn't anything different than I have a boyfriend. Right. And I just have so much gratitude that they felt safe enough to have that conversation with me. Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't really tough for me, actually. I was like, fuck it. Yeah. If you want to, this is who I am. And if you want to be along for the journey, great. Yeah. If not.
And that's that's speaks to your character and who you are, because your upbringing didn't necessarily lend to that, but you and who you are combined with your upbringing, you got yourself out of there, you found yourself, and then you were able to do that. I think that's, I would say that's more about you as a person than what you were provided with.
Thank you.
And so I think that it's beautiful that you are able to take on that kind of role with your siblings of 6. That age gap between your youngest sibling and you is really nice, because you're actually able to intervene between the parent-child situation. You're in that magic place where they kind of have to, they love you, they respect you, but you're more like a peer. You're not the full authority, but they can lean into you and not fear. I don't know.
I'm also at that age where they can ask me for money now, and I'm like,
that's hilarious.
They're like, I know that you're still in school, and I was like, yeah, this is where you need to be. I'm still in school.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
For those that might not know as well, how would you define what a sex therapist does and what they can provide?
Yeah, sex therapy is really about, it can be about anything. It could be individuals coming in looking for support. A great example is someone who's exploring their gender, working through them with that, their sexuality or identifying what that is for them if they want to. Some people don't want to, they just want to have a space to talk through their feelings. And sometimes you need just someone to validate that, like, you are valid, you are yourself. You don't need anyone to give you a gold star to say, like, you're straight, you're gay, you're bi, you're queer, you're like, and other examples of this are couples therapy, people who want to come in and, sometimes people have different libidos. You talk about responsive desire versus spontaneous desire, how to navigate Esther Perel, I'm obsessed with her, how to maintain eroticism in long-term relationships. And it's always really great to kind of like we spoke about earlier, everyone is like, sex is biological. There is a yearning. And there are some people who are, don't have the drive or desire to have sex, but that is a very small amount of the population. The majority of us at some point in our lives have the desire and urge to be physically intimate with others. And whether or not you're physically intimate, sex happens. Like, sex is all around us, happening all the time. There's one really lovely quote that's like, foreplay begins the moment your orgasm ends. And so, like, that's like a really fun idea for me.
I love that.
So much. And we're off again.
Yeah, exactly. Like, sex happens in the text message you send your partner to, like, lead up to the dinner you're going to have, to whatever. And so how to be creative with it, fun with it. It's really good for couples to come in before they have issues. Like, so you want to, like, it's like going to the doctor for a physical once a year or going to the dentist. Like, there's no harm in going to your mental health checkup to just keep everything in check. And for your relationship, be like, all right, it's been 6 months. Let's have a check-in. Let's have a tune-up. How's our sex life? How are our finances? How are our relationships? How is our communication? Like, a sex and relationship therapist can manage those things. And now, with non-traditional relationships becoming more and more common, how to navigate things like that. I was, thruples or kitchen table poly, don't ask, don't tell relationships, things like that. So, like, it really runs the gamut. But to be honest with you, any type of therapy can also lead to some sort of sex therapy, because sex comes up for everyone.
Well, I was going to ask, is there, I'm sure there is, but, like, professionally, a distinction between going to a couples therapist in general, but if you want to talk about these kinds of things, other people that are then couples sex therapists specifically, and if you do couples therapy, it's not necessarily going to go there, or like how, when people are searching for, like, a couple is searching for a therapist, how specific do you need to be if you don't even necessarily know what you need to dive into?
Yeah, you can that's a very good question. Because the human mind will never fully know all of the things, and relationships are constantly changing. And so there are definitely more specific certifications to get. So after I get my clinical license, I'll work towards my ASECT certification, which is the American Association of Sex Educators, Therapists, and Counselors. And then within that, there's a lot of different things around, like, trauma or assault or couples, things like that. And so there is general training that mental health clinicians get as far as sex and relationships. But if you want to look for someone who is specifically like a couples therapist, an easy search, either like through Psychology Today, but for example, there's a clinic in New York called the Gender and Sexuality Therapy Center. And so, like, they work specifically with gender and sexuality, and then within that they can work with individuals, couples, or folks who are in a larger, like, multi-person relationship style. So, like, at that point it would almost be a group therapy session. But
And I wonder, this might be like a little not off topic, but there's a lot of conversations happening right now when it comes to porn and the sex industry in general, but porn and like how that affects people's view of what sex is, and their views on their own body. Like I've had so many conversations with women about like them feeling inadequate because they don't look like the women they see in porn. But there is the other side of just like the good that porn can do and provide.
Yeah.
Like, what are your opinions on that industry in general?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I have a few friends who are sex workers and have worked in porn, and I adore them. I think that sex work is work. It's amazing. It offers people really incredible opportunities to explore their sexuality, explore their kinks and fetishes. It allows people so many positive opportunities. And I agree with you, Alyssa, that it can be damaging because, and I think this goes back to the sex education portion of it, because I completely agree. I was one of those people. I was like, this is how I'm supposed to look when I have sex, when I orgasm. This is how I'm supposed to sound. This is the body position that I'm like that's what I was thinking. And so I think that if we can have proper sex education where we can understand that all sex does not look like this. Porn is entertainment. And like there's also like porn that's you have like professional porn stars, and then you have amateur porn, which is like really much more realistic. It's like two people fucking in their home with their iPhone and they put it up on camera, and then it's like more realistic and you're like, oh, okay. And sometimes it's way hotter than actual like porn stars doing it. And then on the other side, you have more like feminist porn makers or more eroticized porn makers where it's less about the actual like penis and vagina intercourse, and it's more about the storyline, and it's the foreplay, and it's the buildup, and it's the erotica. It's more like a romance novel or something. So I think that there's definitely room for that. And another example of this is I don't know if either of you have listened to Dipsy.
No, but I heard that they sponsor a podcast I listen to. It's like the
audio
bedtime stories kind of, but like sexy bedtime stories. That's how it was.
Quinn is another one, I think.
Yeah.
See a lot. Yeah.
Audio erotica is another great way, because it's really interesting how we connect to our sexuality, and sometimes people connect more visually or more audio, and it opens your imagination. It can be such a teacher and a tool, because as harmful as porn can be, it's also been the vehicle and teacher for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think it's part of the sex education process is talking to people about what their relationship is to porn and understanding it's entertainment and it's not real life.
Yeah. And it kind of seems, there's always going to be, because people are so vastly different, there's going to be the like misogynistic porn, and the whole spectrum of types of porn are always going to exist. Yeah. So it kind of, it seems, I guess, obvious that like where you're coming from and your own sexuality and your own education growing up and your own perceptions of sex will determine if porn is a positive or negative thing to you, because it's all, you have access to all different types, but it's like, if you are empowered by porn, that's valid. And that's probably more about how you are in your sexuality now. And if, it's interesting, because I was reading, so we'll link, your presentation, like some slides from your presentation, because I was reading through, it was just for our listeners, a presentation that you did about basically surveying sex education in this country and what people had there, what did you learn or didn't you learn, and all of these things. And, a lot of it was like, it's fear-based, like we mentioned. Yeah. And I was thinking back to I remember one class in 6th grade, one day, not a class that regularly happened. I remember one day where somebody told us how to put it was literally a condom on a banana. And I think, and it wasn't a whole day. It was part of social studies. We went into another room for 10 minutes and someone told us how to do that, and then told us about, not to get pregnant, and STDs are a thing. And then we go back and we continue with social studies. And and to be fair, maybe it happened 2 days. I remember one day. And I personally have always been, and I've known this about myself, and as I've gotten older, I've looked back and really seen these instances. I've always been very, very connected to my sexuality, and it's always been like a happy thing to me, like an expression and a positive thing. And that's a lot of credit to my parents. My parents didn't really talk about it either way, but they definitely didn't like shame me. But they didn't, they weren't, I don't really remember like sitting down and having conversations with them either. But I guess I'm bringing this up because everyone has their own natural inclination or connection with their sexuality. And that alone is such a wide range. Like I have always felt like I never worried about, like before I kissed somebody, I remember being like, why are people so concerned about where you put your nose? Like, what do you mean? It's just gonna happen. And then like, I don't remember feeling like, oh, how do I, it was just like, it felt like such a natural extension of like my arm is over here. Like it's normal. And I enjoyed it. But I was reading your presentation and I was like, I don't know where that approach in me is just like who I am, but I didn't get education like that. And like I said, I didn't grow up in a super religious household and all of these external factors. So I guess I'm trying to think about ask you the internal factors that actually, it's hard to separate, but nature versus nurture. And how would you recommend, like if you're a parent and you have a child and you don't know where they fall in that. Some people are naturally physically awkward and don't feel comfortable in their sexuality, and that's okay too. So it's like, how is a person supposed to recognize, or not parent a child, because I don't know if you have children, but as a therapist, for example, you're talking to someone and you're trying to figure out where they naturally sit and what is societally inflicted upon them.
That's a really good question. It's interesting too, because it's really hard to say, because at such a young age, we're inundated with so many messages about heteronormative relationships. Starting from Disney movies, for example, we are constantly shown images of a straight white man, a straight white woman, and you end up together and you get we're not explicitly talking about sex, but we're talking about romantic relationships that go on forever. And in theory, right? And so back to your point, I conducted this survey as part of this year-long research that I've been doing around sex education in America. And I was researching how it is in America, how it is in other countries. And then I was reflecting on my own experience. And then I was like, well, what about my friends, right? So I put together the survey, and I was hoping to get at least 100 responses, to get some quantitative and qualitative information to share. And then I ended up getting 190 responses in 10 days. I had to end my survey early because I was like, oh my God, this is so much information to go through right now. I have other classes and things that I have to do. So I was super grateful for the information that was shared with me. But so bringing it back to your question, nature versus nurture, if we're only shown from a really young age and we're taught that you come out of the womb, you're told you're a boy or a girl right off the bat. And then from that point, there are certain expectations that society has constructed around these two genders of boy or girl. And it's expected that you're going to like that other, the opposite gender. However, if we think about, if we truly were born in a genderless world where we could choose whatever gender we wanted to be, and there were no expectations for the type of person we were attracted to, how would that change us? How would that impact our sexuality? It's and that's kind of back to the sex education thing. When I asked people if their sex education was inclusive of LGBTQIA plus or gender information, 74% of people said there was no talk about that at all. And I'm bringing it back to some of my research that there was a USA Today study that said 6 states have no promo homo laws prohibiting any mention of LGBTQIA rights in education. And we see it today in
The
Don't Say Gay in Florida, the anti-trans bills in Texas, and then the Human Rights Campaign shared about a year ago, it was April of 2021, that more than 250 anti-LGBTQ plus bills have been introduced in state legislators across, like, only in 2021. And so all 250 won't be passed. But again, colonialism is showing us that cis, white, hetero men at the top are trying to continuously erase anyone that is other so that they can maintain power, they can maintain the narrative, and it erases any opportunity for people to be freely themselves. And so, to your point, it's like you have to dismantle it.
Yeah.
In this conversation that we're having now, you normalize it. You bring up the question, like, I didn't know that I had an option to be any other way than monogamous until I was cheating on my partners, and I was like, well, this doesn't feel right to me. How can I explore this? Oh, there's an entirely different option of relationship that's non-traditional. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just not.
Yeah, and then it doesn't become a thing of lying to your partner because you have to keep it secret. It becomes a conversation between you two, and you come to your own agreement.
Yeah, and it's very black and white. You are wrong. That is wrong.
Yeah.
You know. And then there's just shame afterwards instead of actual like exploration into other options. And it's just you always hit a wall.
We're missing curiosity, compassion, communication. Like, if you approach your relationships with curiosity, and kind of like a blank slate, and to your point, like, if we can approach relationships with no expectations and like the relationship escalator of like, we're going to go on a date and then we're going to become official and then we're going to get married and then we're going to have kids and then we're going to do this. Like, who made that shit up? And why does it have to be the one way that we do it? Like,
and also, like, once that happens, it's implied. So we're taught that like, that's like a destination to get to. It doesn't take into account the fact that I, as an individual, as a woman, separate from my partner, my kids, my friends, I'm changing. When I look at who I was 1 year ago, I am a very different person. And so I cannot expect my partner to be the same person. We get married. This is who we are. This is our relationship. This is our life, especially on a sexual level, our sex lives. Like, it cannot just be a thing of, okay, when we're 30, I learn what you like. You learn what I like. We have our things we do. And that's how it's going to be until we're 80. No.
Yes, no. And you change. Like, you're the older you get, the more experiences you have, the more you're exposed. You meet people that like bring out different curiosities in you. You're like, oh, I've never thought about this before. And you want to be with someone that you can be like, did you hear what they just said? Do you want to go home and try that? Instead of like going home and never having the conversation ever. And then it stews in your head. Like, you don't want
and then
that.
You separately want to explore it, but maybe you just like search for porn under that name, but you don't tell each other. And then the other person maybe goes and cheats with someone who will do that. When both of you could have just driven home and been like, what did you think about that?
Yeah. So it perpetuates the like shame and fear based.
Wow.
I was going to say, it was like, I feel like that shame is something that I wish we were more cognizant of growing up. It's like, you can have that basic education, whatever. You can know, yes, you know, the penis and the vagina, well, the heteronormative, you know, sex anyway, but not like how to deprogram yourself into getting out of that, like, well, I need to be in this box because I can't function. Otherwise, I won't be considered normal. I won't have an actual healthy relationship if it's not a monogamous one with the white picket fence kids and whatever. And I feel like there's such a taboo-ness, and you coming from Mormonism, like there's taboo-ness on that front, and just in society and in nature, it's like knowing all of that and like what's taboo, like what do you wish, like in the fundamentals of sex education that people usually miss? Like, what do you wish that they got from it the most?
Yeah, I think that normalizing it, making it, it's, guess what? this is your body. This is how it works. And at some point in your life, you're going to want to share it with someone. And that's totally normal. And that's great. When that happens, this is what you do. And include conversations around consent, include conversations around pleasure, include conversations around, like, weird noises happen. It can be funny. You don't always have to orgasm. There's this statistic that cisgender heterosexual male orgasms occur more than any other group of people. Like the orgasm gap, it occurs at like a 95% rate more than other people. And that's because of how we're taught. Yes. But I think it's a very inclusive thing. Like, we don't include any conversations around sexual violence, which can occur within long-term relationships. We don't include conversations around sex and disabilities. We don't include conversations around like so many things that if we were to just normalize these conversations and also have conversations about how to talk about sex, because it's a very intimate and vulnerable thing. And I think that my hope would be the more that we can include non-heteronormative conversations, like different abilities, different body types, like body size, body type, like, and then like any inclusion, if we can lift up the most oppressed people, like their intersecting identities. If you are a queer, Black, disabled individual, if we can lift you up, then everyone else will do better. If we can include your experience in the sex education process, everyone will do better. And looking at how we don't include people, certain oppressed minority groups in sex education, and not only that, but like in general, LGBTQ, LGBTQ kids, for example, suffer at higher rates of bullying, mental health. They're at higher risk for suicide because at a political level, like I just mentioned, the 250 anti-LGBTQ plus bills, at a political level, their existence is trying to be erased. Anti-trans bills, like they're demonizing parents for just trying to give their kids life because otherwise their risk of suicide increases X amount. Like, it's insane. And so it's these people who are so afraid of losing their dominance that they're willing to erase people's identities at a political level, at an education level. And so then while everything else in America is sexualized, they're not willing to do the work to teach people about it at a basic level and how it impacts things like mental health. And then you have teenage pregnancy and then homelessness. Like, it seeps into so many parts of our lives that when obviously I'm like obsessed. So I can talk about it forever.
Same. I mean, that's amazing. It's so true, though. I mean, look at this country and how we treat oppressed groups in general, no matter if it's pertaining to sex. It just, and all across the board, we fail.
Well, and like the irony, what you just said about we sexualize everything.
Yeah.
We like the whole pop star, they're taking like in the 90s, especially, when the pop star, like female pop star thing really became a thing, it was like Britney Spears was put on top, Christina Aguilera, Beyonce, and girl groups. But that was like the pinnacle, and like in the music industry too, they just did it differently. But really, what the goal was find them young. I'm talking, you find them at 14, 15. They come out with their first album at 16. That was Britney, Christina, Destiny's Child, 16. And you are out there performing, and you're sexualized, and that is what you were encouraged to do. You're told to do, and then you're in the while that is all happening and you're on top and you're touring and you're sexy and you're dancing and you're doing your things and you're 16, then you're in interviews being asked about like, what would you say to parents who don't want their kids to go to your show? And you're like, the label's telling me my stylist put me, I don't know. Like, I'm 16. What do you, it's like, so
that's the whole conversation on consent.
Yes. Like we do all of this in our society and we worship sexuality and we like laud it. And yet we don't want anyone to be educated in it. So that it's like,
I know it's like, so sorry. It's so pedophilic, this country, because at the end of the day, I really just think, the patriarchy, like the cis white men that control every narrative in the country ever, just want a hairless, pure little girl at the end of the day. But God forbid we actually want to teach consent, teach what sex actually is, teach the explorations and the joy of sex and your bodies. It's like, God forbid we actually positively teach these children, but we're going to ram down our own narrative of what sex is, which is just abuse at the end of the day.
And in your presentation that you shared, it's like, because like I said, for me personally, my sexuality has been like a place of refuge and joy and happiness. And when you said that in the slides, it was basically mentioning pleasure as an aspect of sex education is like, I've been reading that. I was like, holy shit, that's not even, I'm thinking education, scientific based, like your body, we need to know a lot of things. I'm like, why is it not even mentioned that like this is a gift that we are given as humans with human bodies to experience this pleasure? This is a joyful thing. It can be.
And it's something where even masturbation is looked down on by so many, but it is medically proven to have so many health benefits. It helps you get in touch with your body. It lets you celebrate yourself, and like it's an opportunity to learn what you like and what you don't like. And why can we make cultural jokes and make it okay for men to be masturbating all the time, but the moment a woman wants to self-pleasure, then she's like throw in any insulting word, like it's really disappointing, especially to your point about like in the 90s, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, but also thinking about how technology has impacted sexuality, relationships, and looking at how we have continued to grow up and be exposed to more things sexually. But think about the kids who are on Instagram, they're on TikTok, and it's kind of back to the porn conversation, because how much are you being exposed to? What messaging are you being exposed to about your body, about attraction, who you can and cannot be attracted to, relationships in general? There's a really amazing LGBTQ community on TikTok, but then you also have people who are like bots and cat baiting.
Catfishing.
Catfishing.
Like young girls, but like, and there's like a shit ton of porn that pops up on Instagram too, and so people are getting it from all angles. We are like literally drowning and inundated in sex, and so one of the things that I'm thinking about doing, are you guys familiar with intimacy coordinators, intimacy directives?
No.
Yes.
What is, is that for like films?
Yeah. So anytime there's nude or sex, a nudity or sex scene in TV, film, plays, media in general, they're starting to require intimacy coordinators to be on set to make sure that pleasure's represented accurately. If there's like trans or queer folks, that they are, or non-binary folks, that their pronouns are being used, they're correct, like everything is being taken care of. If there's a traumatic scene, that there's like aftercare provided. And so I'm looking into doing that down the line, because my background is in dance and performance. And so like so much about creating those scenes would be choreography, but then also because of my like mental health certification, I can also provide those services as well on set, and which I think would be a really amazing opportunity to kind of like shift the narrative of how media presents sex, sexuality, and relationships. So that's like some longer term.
Yeah, that's
goal,
really cool.
Yeah, I've as an actor, like I've and going to school for it, like I've had, and my friends have had countless traumatic things happen during scenes where we're just in rehearsals, not even just like we're on stage performing, it's just straight up rehearsals where you're supposed to be working out the kinks, everything that goes wrong, or that can go wrong. You just don't. And it's just so interesting. It's like, well, when you have a fight scene, you have a fight call you have a fight rehearsal with someone that's trained in that. But there's nothing when it comes to intimacy. You're expected to make out with this person. Sorry, like since high school, since I was as young as can be, I was taught like, well, this is, you want to be an actor, this is what expected of you. You got to give yourself over to this without any explanation of why or if it's necessary. Or
And what you said about aftercare, like Alyssa, you've mentioned like acting classes where it's so fucked up, honestly, like in what happens, and then you just leave and go to Spanish class, and there's no like, do you need to? You're gonna talk to someone after this, or like, how did that aftercare in general?
The idea of aftercare, I was introduced to it. I'm like a kinky person myself, so I was introduced to it in the BDSM world. But I think that aftercare is so important, not only in sexual situations, but like if you have a conflict with your partner, if there's a rupture, you need to repair and you need aftercare. Like, I think that aftercare should be introduced after like a hard day at work. Yeah. After like, and especially with what's going on in the world right now, after like the most recent subway shooting here in New York, like my like where I'm interning right now for my program, we needed a group session. We needed to like talk it out. And to me, that's a form of aftercare, coming together as a community. Like, what do you need? How can I support you? How can we support each other? How do we get through this?
Yeah. It's so interesting as, aftercare being getting talked about so much more now. And I feel like millennials are kind of spearheading that conversation. And I think about it's like, this is going dark, but I was like, I wonder, because we never had any sort of aftercare after like 9/11, which is, I think, the biggest thing that like fucked us up, like the first big little.
You're right. Like we never had anything no class or teacher sat down and was like,
no, and I feel like that's a really big example, but I feel like it kind of trickles down to so many different things of just like things that are traumatic, things that affected us on such deep levels, and especially with sex, something so sensitive and personal.
You're bringing millennials into it, and I have to just say that like the numbers now, with especially the pandemic impacting how teenagers and adolescents are interacting with each other, they're having sex later because they're like meeting less physically, but they're engaging more in digital sex, and that's a really interesting like how, what, where, when are you protected? Is your identity? Are there photos? So I think that there's, again, a lot of benefits to the technological side of educating people and access to information, but
where do you begin? If you have clients yourself like that have a digital relationship, because it's newer grounds to cover. Like you have to, like exactly like you said, you have to cover whether identity is being protected, how much of yourself are you giving away in videos and pictures, and
down to, I mean, obviously like tattoos, what's showing, do you trust this? Like they're very specific things like that.
That's wild.
But it's like the same education level where you have to cover that. That's a safety level. But then you also want to acknowledge that like digitally, like phone sex or Skype sex or something like that can be a really connecting, beautiful thing with someone you're with. So it's like, how do you educate on a level where it's the same thing, like balancing those two things out, like be aware of this. Also, this isn't a bad thing to do. This could be good. Right. This can help you explore, but like be aware of this, like a delicate balance all the time. Yeah.
I wonder, are there ways that you found in your education that can be helpful when you're reaching out to people that could have all of these biases, whether it's religious or cultural, anything that's like normally if they view sex as problematic in nature? Is there easy ways that you found that you could reach out to these people to kind of shed that shame and shift their perspective on what sex could be in a healthy way?
Yeah. When you say reach out to people, do you mean like when I'm working with them? Therapeutic contents? Yeah. So it's interesting because I have worked with people who either are coming from a place of shame culturally, whether they're like their culture is it, or they grew up really religious, and I think that the internal battle is already there and it's ripe for exploration, and it's just holding a lot of curiosity and compassion for them and validating that, like, that they are 100% valid in their feelings and their exploration, and helping them kind of dismantle the idea of where the shame came from. Because if you can kind of understand the root of of where the shame is, like, okay, if it's cultural, what about it culturally? Let's talk about this. And kind of, there's something in school that we talk about, the liberation health model, where you have this like triangle and you put the problem in the middle of it. And so it's like shame around my sexuality. And where does the conflict come from? Like, what am I experiencing on a personal level, on a cultural level, and on an institutional level? And when you can kind of pull back and look at it from a macro lens versus just a micro lens of your personal experience, you can kind of understand how the institution of religion impacts my cultural experience and my family, which impacts my personal issues with my shame, and unpacking where the shame comes from. Yeah. So it's therapy. It's like unpacking your past. It's looking at your current relationships. It's looking at your relationship to yourself. How much acceptance do you have for yourself? And like, a lot of individuals who are queer have some internalized homophobia that they are not even aware of. So you have to like address that if it's there. And it's holding compassion for yourself, because we're all trying to figure it out at the same time. I just turned 31, and I swear that I just figured out how to do my fucking taxes. Like, I don't know. Like, sexuality and relationships, I still don't know how to do that, but that's why I'm in school. Research is research, and so it's selfish, because I want to help myself as much as I want to help other people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's how we are guided to our passions, is usually something that we are deficient in or have had issues with, or that's why we are drawn to certain things, and that's why we become so good at those things, because it is a genuine interest. Because no one wants to talk to a therapist who came out the womb with everything figured out.
Right. Yeah, and I think back to your point, Alyssa, is like, you have to also, it's seeking out connection, finding support, finding community, whether it's an online forum, whether it's a therapist, whether it's your friends or family, your partner. You also, Brene Brown talks about, like, you need to name the shame. You need to own it first before you can unpack it. But if you hide it, if you constantly try to pack it away, it's going to come out in other ways. Then kind of need to face it head on. And everyone has it. Everyone has it.
And I imagine your experience with this is quite saturated because of your growing up in Utah.
Oh yeah.
With Mormonism. And I mean, I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I have watched Salt Lake City Housewives. So not to brag, but no.
I mean, that's education in itself.
But they deal a lot with shame, like these women, because a lot of them came from divorce, which is frowned upon in general. And then also just women that are sexual in nature, and how they were just ostracized from their communities because of their sexual explorations and wanting to do that, wanting to just hook up with a boyfriend one night and then feeling intense shame afterwards. So it's interesting, your perspective, because I feel like you know where that comes from, right? Like, the
shame, guilt, and judgment that I had for myself, and that I felt like I was getting from other people, from God, like, no, like, it was so stifling and so suffocating that I could not even, I would live my life. It felt like a double life for some time, because I would like live my life and have this like experience, and then I would go into a massive depression and like unpacking it and totally lose my mind over it, because I was like, everyone thinks this of me, I think this of me, and I'm still, it's a daily practice. And even to your point, like things like divorce, like I'm currently going through that myself, and going to school to be a sex and relationship therapist while going through a divorce has been really informative. And there's, it's like devastating and heartbreaking. And at the same time, I'm super grateful for my marriage and my relationship. I wouldn't be where I am today without it. And I think that one of my first patients that I worked with was also going through a divorce at the same time. And so that was wild for me because I was experiencing it as myself. And then it was a man and a straight man. And so hearing about it from his perspective, and even divorce, like, we spoke about this a bit earlier, but like, I'm a different person than I was when I met my ex-husband, and I'm going to be a different person in 5 years and in 10 years. And I forget where the quote comes from, but like, a reason, a season, a lifetime. People come into your life for these different reasons, seasons, and lifetimes. Lovers, friends, partners, parents. You're not with someone forever. Your parent will eventually pass away. Your best friend will, like, relationships evolve and shift and change, and we need to be able to fluctuate with that if we want to have, like, even though it ended, it doesn't mean that I can't, like, deeply appreciate it and celebrate what I learned and walk away from it, like, bruised, battered, but I am fucking thriving. Like,
yeah, and it's also gonna deeply inform whatever you enter into next with anyone else, because you learn that much more about yourself, what you need, what you don't, what you won't accept, what you will accept, what you were missing, what you were getting. It's like everything just adds to deepen the joy of whatever comes next, I think. But that's a really interesting juxtaposition to be studying this and then going through that, and then like, wow.
Did you, I mean, it might be an intensely personal question, but did you have a different relationship with God, if you still believe, while coming into your own, like, sexual exploration? And do you still think that, like, people have that issue if they're coming from a religious,
foundation?
Foundation. When it comes their approach to sex, like, can they still have a deep personal relationship with God and still love their body, essentially?
So my personal relationship with God is not one. I after when I moved out of my parents' home and I moved into my own place, and I was in college, I was dancing, I was part of the art community, a lot of queer friends, people were more in line with my personal beliefs and morals and values. I took a course in college about religion, where we studied different religions, and I kind of came to the conclusion that the essence of every religion is loving each other and compassion and just trying to do your best and be your best version of yourself, and everything else is made up. Like, everything else is a human's interpretation of something, and we all interpret it different ways, and we all will use this book differently, like, whatever. So when I experienced, I had some experiences that really made me quite bitter towards religion in general. Like, don't talk to me about religion, fuck off. Like, I'm an atheist, don't even take it there. And I've really had to learn how to soften, because I understand, I think now that I'm in a more spiritual place, like, I believe that there is something greater than myself. I don't know what it is. I just, like, had my tarot card pulled for the first time last night, because I'm like, I love the idea that there's more. I don't know what it is, but I'm open. I believe in science more than anything. But I know that in the work that I'm going to do, that people, like, there's queer people in every religion, and and they still love their religion, and it connects them, and it grounds them to their culture, to their family, and they're just having some conflict between this one part of their identity and this. And so for me personally, I have to soften and understand that people, like, there are different things that ground them, especially if they've had experiences with death, grief, loss. There's something that holds them, that anchors them. And so in regards to their sex and sexuality, it's kind of looking at what their personal identity is to God, what it means to them, why it is that way, and also helping them to understand that, like, in the context of that, how can you live your fullest self, live your fullest life. Do you think that God doesn't want you to enjoy your body? Do you think God does not, like, if God is XYZ, why can't you still be confident in your body? Why do you like, who says that you can't have a healthy, fulfilling sex life with your partner? Like, it's kind of unpacking it. It's a very situational thing, but it is requiring me to, I think that that's one of my biggest issues, one of my biggest challenges.
Yeah.
I imagine.
What would you, to kind of wrap it up, this is we're asking you like really vague, hard questions because we're just like,
okay.
What's the best thing? But I
love it.
It's just, there's so many things, and I love your individual perspective on this because, so what would your advice be to someone who feels disconnected from their sexuality? And this could be because of religion, because of any various reason, because they are like
bad self-esteem.
Yeah, low self-esteem. Their family doesn't accept that they're not straight, whatever it may be. Someone who's struggling with that, some maybe like 3 or 4 things that you could name to help them ultimately like expand their connection and love for their own sexuality, and then maybe like name 4 or 5, and then depending on their situation, maybe they could grab one.
Yeah. For me personally, I think that finding community is one of the biggest things, because as much as we like to think that, I mean, we all are unique and special, and these problems are universal.
Yeah.
So there are other people out there experiencing it. And I think that having conversations, finding community, whether you do that, and support, like if you can afford therapy, there's lots of opportunities for that. Whether it's an online platform or a community sliding scale platform. And I'm happy to give you guys resources and links for those. Also, like Instagram and TikTok, there's a lot of creators online, queer sex therapy, shrimp teeth. It's educating yourself and arming yourself with the knowledge and the confidence that A, you're not alone, B, there is help for you. There are other people out there who will validate you and who will see you and who will hold space for that incredible person that you are. And that whatever you are, like, you don't need to label it. You can if you want, if that helps you, but like,
yeah,
you as you are exactly who you need to be.
Valid.
Like, you don't need to fit into the mold that societal expectations have created for you. You can be your weird, quirky, kinky self, and that's fucking awesome. And there are people out there who will love and accept you for that.
Yeah.
You might need to look for it. You might need to like do some searching, but like if you're a weird, kinky queer person, you can go on dating apps like Field, which is specifically for non-traditional relationships or people who are looking for things outside of traditional relationships. You can follow those Instagram accounts. Netflix just put out a really great 3-part special called Pleasure Principles, which touches on the things that we just talked about. I think that if you guys haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it.
I'm going to watch that tonight.
Yeah, it's a 3-part series. The first one is called Our Bodies, the second is Our Minds, and the third is Our Relationships. And it touches on decolonizing these things. It touches on sex education. It touches on the brain and how we function when we have different hormone fluctuations, not only women when we're going through our cycle, but like men, because men also have hormonal cycles, but who narrates the conversation around like women being overly emotional? Like it kind of touches on these things, which is really lovely. And
wow, that sounds amazing. I want to watch that.
Yeah, there's so many books out there. Ethical Slut is a really lovely one. Oh my God, there's so many books.
Have you read, so Jordan Schomer, one of my friends, she's an astrologer and she's been a guest on here. But she gave me the book, Come As You Are.
Yes, Come As You Are. And if you also, The Body Keeps Score, there's so many things about like how to get in touch with your body. there's so many book lists and servers, and I'm happy, like, if people want to like follow me, shoot me a DM. I'm happy to recommend podcasts, books. There are communities, there are people, there are spaces, there's space for everyone in the world. And if there's not one, you can create one and people will follow.
That's such good advice. And that's such a wide range of things that people can do on their own, because not everyone's like at a place where they're like, I'm going to seek out a therapist and talk about my sex issues. Like, you know, there's so many things in between. And I love that you just put all that out. I hadn't heard of most of that. I didn't know there was a dating app for like, there's so many things we don't know. And you're right. Like using these, there's all the negative in social media that exists. But if you use it to curate your own like community in your life, it's really beautiful. Yeah.
And at the end of my presentation too, I put some resources there for people who are curious about sex education stuff, that everyone deserves sex ed. There's some good resources there, blogs. There's Planned Parenthood has a really amazing free teaching portal for sex education if people are curious about teaching their kids, re-educating themselves. I also think that it's important to like have these conversations with your friends. Like, what was your sex ed? Have these conversations with your partner. Like, what was your sex education like? What do you know? What do you think? Because I interviewed our friends, Dace and Alex, for this, and they've been together for 8 years, and that was the first time that they ever knew about what each other was taught about sex. Like, what you know about sex and what you were taught about sex are different, and how you got to this place can inform a lot of the conversations you've had, and you'd be like, oh my God, I didn't know that. Let's try this. Have you ever thought about this? Were you taught about this? Like, instead of just coming together, there's so much beauty in coming together and what organically happens, but the conversations that can occur out of these types of curious places, coming at it from a very curious, non-judgmental, and compassionate place is most important.
That's so beautiful.
I love that so much. Oh, thank you so much, Shelby. And we're going to be linking your Instagram and
your presentation and the lists of resources
on our social media. So thank you so much. That was amazing. Like we said in the beginning, we could have talked to her for hours, and we want to continue to do so and have her back for a part 2. We're saying like maybe like a kink
and actually
episode.
I'm just thinking now, like with how many, there's so many layers and aspects to this, that I think it'd be really great if our audience on Instagram, if you guys could engage and we could put up a thing and have people send in questions, and then next time we have her on, we could actually include some of those, or in leading up to when we have her on next, because I think a lot of people listening, this is such a personal thing.
It could be anonymous too.
It could be anonymous. Yeah. So like you know, there are a lot of things that maybe came up during this episode for you or your partner, or you're interested in, and then we'll let you guys know when we're going to have her back. And then maybe you could submit some anonymous questions, but it's a very interesting conversation.
I love that idea. And we're going to be linking her Instagram, Shine
Bright Like a Shelby.
Shine Bright Like a Shelby.
But it's with underscores in between each word.
Yeah. So we'll link her Instagram so you can get more Shelby in your life. And also on our Instagram at the SOS Pod, you're going to find links to all of her recommendations, books.
Yeah, and that'll be on our stories this week.
Yeah.
As the episode comes out this week, we'll be promoting all the resources she gave also in our show notes.
And we'll be posting on our Instagram parts of her presentation that we reference a lot in this, and where they're cited, because everything is backed up. Whatever the.
Everything is validated.
Everything's validated. Exactly.
So the charity nonprofit for this episode is Jane's Due Process. Jane's Due Process helps young people in Texas navigate parental consent laws and confidentially access abortion and birth control. They provide free legal support, one-on-one case management, and stigma-free information on sexual and reproductive health. Their work includes legal support and one-on-one case management for Texas teens obtaining judicial bypass, text line for young people needing information on birth control and family planning services without parental involvement, advocating for and centering the voices of young people in the fight for reproductive rights. They're working towards a future where young people in Texas have full reproductive freedom and autonomy over their healthcare decisions. To learn more and donate, please visit janesdueprocess.org. And then Shelby also sent us other important funds to check out. Highly recommend checking these out. The New Orleans Abortion Fund, Roe Fund of OKRCR. We're going to link these, but just so you guys have them. And the Yellowhammer Fund. And these are all Shelby recommended. And she clearly knows exactly what she's talking about.
Yep. Again, thank you, Shelby. We got to have her on again. And our Instagram is at the SOS Pod, Twitter at the SOS Pod. And we're on YouTube, SOS with Molly and Alyssa, and wherever you find your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, we are there. So subscribe to us, rate and review us. It helps us reach more people.
Yeah.
We also have a Patreon, guys. $3, $7, $11. You could help support us, create more content. You can get merch and bonus content as well. Other goodies are included in that. So please check that out if you like it.
Yes. I'm Molly Cottrell.
I'm Alyssa Rosano.
Here's to turning meltdowns
into magic.